the first guy I trained was, I guess in 1975, was Tony Atlas.
Okay.
And I didn't train him at a school. He was a Virginia State wrestling champion, and the office in Charlotte wanted to make him a wrestler.
Okay.
And they knew that I had an amateur background. So like, can you come to the YMCA and work with him and, help get him ready? So that's actually probably the first guy I can remember training. I take it back. I trained King Kong Bundy years before
We're going to talk about all this.
Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to keep it in order. So
yeah, no, let's start from the beginning. Let's talk about your memories watching wrestling as a child. Where were you born and raised?
I grew up in a little town called Repapa, and then later moved to Gibbstown. And, couldn't wait for Saturdays to watch wrestling. And then the first time I got to go to the matches my dad took me, it was Buddy Rogers versus Rocca.
Wow.
And I was thrilled just to be there. And then, since they were the guys that they were pushing on television, that they were the guys that I focused on. But later on that night, there was a little diner right here in this town. And Wild Red Berry came in. And I was 8 years old. And I went to him and said, what do I got to do to be a professional wrestler? And he's like, you need to get at least 10 years amateur experience. And fortunately, I lived in the right town, at the right time. And I started in 7th grade, wrestled in 7th and 8th grade, 4 years of high school. Then I went to junior college and then up to Trenton State. And, it worked out for me.
Now, you had an incredible record as an amateur. You want to talk about that?
No. It's in the past. I'm proud of it. Don't misunderstand me. Because I wrestled for a relatively good college, and I wrestled some good guys. There was one guy I could not beat. His name was Joel Kistle. Now, how ironic is that? You talk about the guy that kicked your ass all the time. But he would beat me. He would advance, and then Chris Taylor would beat him. So that was the way. It went. But Joel was a very nice guy, and I wonder what he's doing every once in a while.
Were you ranked number 4 in the NCAA or no?
I was seeded 4th.
Okay.
Seeded 4th.
Okay.
So if my college didn't think that I was worth sending to the nationals, so they didn't want to spend the money. But I had the number 4 seed that year, and Backlund had number 1. And King Kong Bundy's brother, Chris Pallies, had number 2.
Oh, wow. So there's history between you and his family, basically.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Did you play any other sports growing up, or were you just strictly amateur wrestling?
Football. Well, I went out for football to get in shape for wrestling.
So that worked out, definitely. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was fun. Defense is all I wanted to play because all I wanted to do was get the guy with the ball. That was the fun part. I didn't want to make any holes open up so he could go by me and get all the glory. I wanted to catch him. I can remember my dad being all PO'd that I wasn't playing both ways. I couldn't make him understand that I didn't want to play both ways. I just wanted to have fun. And he punched the football coach in the mouth because he asked him why I wasn't playing both ways, and the coach told him I was lackadaisical. My dad didn't know what that meant, so I just got pissed off and punched him in the mouth.
Oh, wow. So I guess, how did you make the transition from amateur wrestling to pro wrestling? You met Red Berry.
Right. Well, like I said, when I met Red Berry, he said you got to get 10 years amateur experience. And then this town right here is where all of the wrestlers lived. Back in the days of the WWWF.
Perfect.
Yeah, they all lived here. The Mongols lived here. Smasher Sloan lived here. Bob Orton Sr. lived here. They all lived here because the territory at that time didn't go any further north than Maine or any further south than Washington, D.C. or any further west than Pittsburgh. So if they were here,
perfect.
It was a central location, yeah. And it just happened that they settled down in a wrestling town, and Bill Watts used to come down to wrestling practice.
Wow. And how did you meet Gorilla Monsoon early on?
Well, Wild Red Berry brought him to one of my high school matches to watch me wrestle because he thought I had some talent.
And from there, they picked you up?
No, from there, it kind of went away. And Red Berry had retired, and I got a letter from him. And he said, if you still want to be a professional wrestler, I'm coming to New York, and I'll introduce you to the people that you need to know. So I got all excited about it. I'm doing push-ups and sit-ups and jogging and all that stuff. And I never heard from him. And I knew where Gorilla Monsoon lived in Willingboro. So I went over with this letter, and I'm like, he said he was going to come and introduce me to some people. You're the only guy if you remember me. And I told him about him coming to the high school. He's like, yeah, I remember. Well, what happened was Red Berry died like a week before he was supposed to get here.
Oh, wow.
And nobody ever called me and told me or anything. I was just a little fan Mark kid that,
right.
He kept in touch with.
So you hooked up with Gorilla, or did you
right.
go to New York? Okay, so he pretty much took you under his
wing?
He
took me under his wing and did everything he could for me.
Do you consider Gorilla your mentor?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about your training. So you meet Gorilla. What happens from there?
Well, I meet him, and he said, you don't want to do this, kid. He goes, it's a terrible business. You're going to meet some of the biggest assholes you've ever met in your life. He said, but you will meet some of the nicest people that you've ever met in your life. And I just pestered him and pestered him and pestered him. And so he had me come into Wildwood, and I would put up the ring and work out a little bit. And then I had an opportunity. Fuji fixed it up for me to go to Portland, Oregon for a week.
For Don Owens?
Well, it was Don Owens' territory, but I went out there and I worked with a guy named Haru Sasaki for a week. He came down to the sportatorium and trained me every day. So when I came back the next weekend to train in Wildwood, I knew all this stuff. And he's like, where you been?
Now, were you smart to the business at this point in time or not yet?
Well, I think I was smart to the business when I was an amateur.
Okay.
And, it's like, wasn't any great secret, but that never let the breath out of me. You know what I'm saying? It's like, this is what these guys do. This is what they are. And one of the things, and I don't want to mention the name, said, Larry, you'll never have to worry if anybody gives you any shit in there. Snatch them, So
right.
I always felt comfortable in the ring because I knew I could take care of myself.
Was there a backlash from your peers in amateur wrestling for turning to pro wrestling at all?
Absolutely.
What do they try to tell you, discourage you?
Well, they... probably the most depressing one was I was just sitting out with a bunch of guys one day, and an amateur wrestler from town here, and we're still friends, and I talk to him all the time, just looked at me and goes, how could you? And that said it all for everybody.
Right. Okay.
But when they started announcing from Paulsboro, New Jersey on with the shows, that went away.
Put over to town.
Yeah.
What was your training schedule like early on?
Well, you just trained all the time. I mean, Fuji was a idiot as far as training. He would just push you as far as you could go because it wasn't his sweat. He thought it was funny. One time he told me he stopped his car and said, I saw a wallet. So I got out to get the wallet, and he goes, you have to jog now. He made me jog.
Wow. And was he from around here too, Mr. Fuji?
Well, he was living here working the territory.
Okay. Now, as far as training, so basically you would be on the road training at the different house shows or arena shows back in the day. You didn't go to an actual school. You were pretty much going to different towns, getting there early. Is that what would...
Well, that's before I even got on the road. I mean, at first right here is where I would go put up the ring and I would train. I would drive Fuji to North Attleboro, Massachusetts. They had a boxing ring. And my first day in the ring, I took 100 slams, 100 backdrops, 100 bumps over the top rope, and 100 turnbuckles on a boxing ring. Huh. But I didn't care. This is what I had to do.
I was going to ask you, did you ever want to quit?
Yes.
And what made you stick it out?
Stupid. It's just this town, Paulsboro, you do not quit. That's not in their vocabulary.
What was the hardest thing for you to pick up for yourself? Was it taking the bumps or was it learning in the ring psychology?
The hardest thing to pick up was, and I probably never really picked it up, but it was seeing other people kiss ass to advance their careers when other people, not only myself, but a lot of other people had more talent and they would be by the wayside because they weren't ass kissers. Right.
Who were some of the guys that you consider ass kissers from, Vince Senior days in New York?
Well, let me give that some thought because I don't want to accuse anybody unjustly.
No problem.
There might be too many to pick from. I don't know.
Was Mr. Fuji the one guy that was pretty much your main trainer, or were there other guys in the territory at the time that would take you under the wing and you would learn some stuff from?
Well, Gino, he was like my guiding light, and Fuji was there to make sure that I learned how to get it done. So they were pretty much the two that did it.
So as far as training goes, how long did you train for until you felt comfortable of being in front of a crowd?
I felt comfortable in front of a crowd right away.
Right away?
Yeah. That wasn't an issue. I mean, right here in school, we get 1,000 people to wrestle match.
Watch thousands of exclusive shoot interviews right now on TitleMatchNetwork.com.